It's the Draft Fellows coming at you live. Kyle and Andrew breaking down the drive. Prospects to roster, we got the flow. First round picks to the ones you don't know. Talk about the combine, skills on display. Who's rising up and who's falling away. Roster building like a GM in the zone. Kyle Fellows, Andrew Mertig, they own the phone.
Hey, welcome back to the Draft Fellows podcast. My name is Andrew Mertig. I am without Kyle today, but make sure you're checking out our content on YouTube or your favorite audio podcasting platform. We had a show that came out yesterday, Friday, if you're watching this later, reviewing the draft classes of the AFC East and North. And one of the conversations circled around the Cleveland Browns draft class and their trade down from the second overall pick to the fifth, where, of course, the Jaguars moved up to get Travis Hunter. The Browns ended up taking Mason Graham at pick 5. And I mentioned I had some issues with the way that they maneuvered that trade. And I've sort of been simmering on that for about 24 hours. Talked to Kyle, and he said I could go ahead and release this as my thoughts. And it's not a critique necessarily of what the Browns did, but a question. And one of the things that we like to focus on is roster building as a whole. And so I wanted to take a look back at what some of the realistic options that the Browns could have taken that I would have preferred over the Graham pick. So if you take a look back at the Jacksonville-Cleveland trade and what that actually ended up being, the Jaguars sent the 5th overall pick, the 36th pick overall in the second round, a 4th rounder, and then their 2026 first. So a pretty good haul to move up 3 spots. Now, here is where my issue was. Is Mason Graham an elite level talent worthy of pick 5? And you can look at this a couple of different ways. One is that the Browns got a really good player in Graham, plus they netted a 2nd, a 4th, and then, of course, that coveted 2026 first rounder. Another way to look at it is they spent the 5th overall pick on a defensive lineman that you might question the upside on. We think Mason Graham is going to be a really good player. Like, don't get me wrong. I think he's an outstanding football player. But given where the Browns are from a current roster construction, knowing that they're going to have to make some cuts going forward, they're going to have to right their cap situation. Could they have maybe moved down even further, made a second trade, which is what I was advocating for, and really come away with this in a very strong spot to have the draft capital to then maybe make themselves a contender a lot earlier than it currently seems like they're going to be able to do. So could, in theory, the Cleveland Browns have traded the 5th overall pick to the LA Rams? So we know, based on the videos that the Carolina Panthers organization released, that the Rams were making a really serious offer to move up to number 8, but the Panthers weren't willing to move down unless it was considered like a blockbuster, dynasty-changing or a franchise-changing type of trade. And so we don't know what that is, but we can guess a little bit. If a team is going to move down from 8 to 26, they're probably asking for multiple future firsts, and it didn't sound like the Rams were willing to do that. But what if the Cleveland Browns were willing to make that trade? And let's just go with a super conservative estimate, knowing what the Rams had in draft capital. We're going to move down to pick 26 from pick 5. That's a huge move. And we're going to just ask you to give us a 1st and a 2nd next year. Now, normally that would be a pretty significant underpay, but I think given this year's class, I don't think that's necessarily a terrible deal to take. And given where the Browns are currently, I could accept that, even if the trade value charts are going to disagree with me. And then what we know is the Rams, who were trying to trade up, then got on the clock at pick 26, and the Falcons made them a really aggressive offer. So let's just pretend in this situation, the draft unveils really similarly to how it did, and the Falcons are still eager to move up to pick 26. And they did end up giving up a 4th round pick back to the Falcons, and then the Falcons gave up their 2nd round pick, which is pick 46, a 7th rounder, and their 2026 first. So that is another possibility that, again, the Browns, I was advocating for a second trade down. Now, going to 26 is a massive trade down. But then let's say we're already at 26. Let's move down one more time, get another first round pick. So I think this really presents itself as 4 different unique scenarios. Number one, you could argue that they should have just picked at number 2. And they could have gotten a Travis Hunter or an Abdul Carter, both of which would be really, really fantastic players. I think situation 2 is exactly what they did. You're going to get Mason Graham. You end up netting Carson Schlesinger by getting that additional second round pick from the Jags. And then you're also getting a 2026 first, which is a perfectly good haul. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that there's some other options here. Situation 3 is just doing that one additional trade down. And so you're getting the Jags 2026 first, a Rams 26 first and second. You still get Carson Schlesinger. And then you could get somebody like a Tyleik Williams at pick 26 if you wanted to just keep it as a defensive lineman in the tune of Mason Graham. So you're making that downshift from a Mason Graham type player who you could consider an elite level prospect to a Tyleik Williams, still a first rounder, but you are netting an additional first in the 26th draft. Situation 4 is getting the Jags first in 26, the Rams first in 2026, and the Falcons first in 2026. Plus, you're getting a 26 second from the Rams. You still get Carson Schlesinger, and then you're picking at 46. So, the second round, there was kind of a dead zone for the defensive line in the middle of the second, but let's just move up the first available defensive lineman, Shamar Turner, who ended up in Chicago, if you want to keep it as a defensive lineman. And there were certainly other good players there, so it doesn't have to be that. But you still get a rookie class of Quinshon Judkins, Carson Schlesinger, and now basically you're trading Mason Graham for Shamar Turner, which is definitely a downgrade. But you could have 4 first-round picks for 2026 in a trade scenario that, quite frankly, like sometimes we just make stuff up, right? You have to have a partner. But one of these trades actually happened from that pick. And the other one, I think hypothetically, if the Rams were willing to move up to 8, they'd be more than happy to move up to 5 for the same price. And so I don't think this is that hypothetical of a situation. And I think this is a relatively realistic scenario. So if you ask me, knowing that the 2026 class, at least right now, a lot of ball game to play here, looks like a fantastic quarterback draft. And the Browns need a quarterback, we think, right? We're relying on a 3rd and a 5th round pick to pan out. That doesn't typically happen in the NFL. So you're going to give yourself more ammunition. Plus, you're going to have all of those resources available to you as you face an aging roster, a really expensive roster, and knowing that you're going to have to make some changes going forward. And so when Kyle and I talk about roster building, this is one of the things that I like to consider. The what if? So Mason Graham, to you, is going to be worthy of essentially 2 additional first-round picks next year. The difference between him and Shamar Turner, and then how you can use those to increase your flexibility going forward. So just a hypothetical. Tell us what situation of the ones that I presented you like the most. If you're a Cleveland Browns fan, we'd especially love to hear from you. But as we continue to talk draft and how that impacts roster building going forward, this is one of those scenarios that, while it seems pretty wild, is kind of out there as a realistic possibility. So, this is the kind of thing we like to talk about off air, but this is one of those that I was really looking into and thought, hey, there's a pattern here that I think could have actually happened. So, hope you found that interesting. And this is just a quick little snapshot of the Draft Fellows podcast. We will be back next week with a breakdown of our final 2 AFC divisions and each of their draft classes. We really appreciate you joining me. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show, and we'll be previewing a lot more of the 2025 draft content in the coming weeks, and then transitioning over to the 2026 class and really starting to get a preview of what that draft could shape up to be. But from the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.
Kyle got the insight, Andrew brings the heat. Breaking down the roster every single week. Catch us on the podcast, we coming through your speakers. Top picks for practice squad, we got the seekers. Team dynamics, contracts, and the trades. From the draft day excitement to the accolades. Draft fellows on the track, we gone strong. Analyze the plays, we can't be wrong. From the 40-yard dash to the longest throw. We talking pro ball, yeah, you know.